welcome everyone to AILA Special Interest Group. My name is Taj Farazis, and I'm the Executive Director of AILA. And we host this event on the last Monday of every month to talk about a different topic about AI and, topic of interest. This month is on climate. And so we've got an amazing panel. We're actually changing up the format this time. So typically we do a fireside chat. This time we're doing a panel discussion with the amazing Lisa Yu as our moderator. And so basically the format is we're going to do this little panel discussion. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to use the chat. And definitely after this panel discussion, we're going to be having some audience participation. And so this should run until 8 o'clock. And so housekeeping rules, please keep your microphone and your video off. And we will have an opportunity for you to talk afterwards. And so without further ado, I will hand it off to your amazing moderator, Lisa. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa. I'm a partner at 99 Ventures, and I'm also on the human impact team of Anthropocene Ventures, which is a climate fund based in San Francisco. So hence, I'm bringing this topic and this panel together to discuss AI solutions for climate tech. And I know Todd said, if you're not speaking, to turn off your videos, but I actually like seeing everyone's faces because we don't want to just be talking to a bunch of black boxes with names that are hard to pronounce. We want to engage with you visually. Do feel free to turn the mics off though, but it would be great to see your faces. And to for anyone who wants to ask questions, just put it in the chat, and of course we'll get to them in the order that they come through. Thank you, David. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Brian. Anyone else that want to show their faces? I know it's Monday night. And Alexis, great. See, so now it feels like we've got a little bit of an audience going here. So that's really awesome. I wanted to, welcome all the speakers on the panel today. So, today we'll be discussing 2 out of the 4 elements, wind and fire, which is really interesting. In the future, we might do a whole climate panel with all the elements, but this is specifically for climate and AI. But, a lot of centuries pass and generations pass, everyone's trying to figure out wind patterns and figure out, how to control fire, right? These are just really key elements in our civilization and in our lives. And now technology is able to bring some solutions to the forefront. So I'm really thrilled to introduce our panelists, CEO and co-founder Katelyn Hertel, CTO and co-founder Shwetha Jayaraj, thank you. And
it rhymes.
Thank you for the correction. And CEO and founder of Fyto, Marcel Furmie. So first wanted to just give these incredible founders an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then we will go into some Q&A. Feel free to unmute. So let's start with Katelyn and Shwetha.
Okay, so Katelyn has the slide up of all of us. Thanks for doing that. So me and Katelyn, I think it's but yeah, me and Katelyn started WindtelligentAI. So we're predicting wind speeds. I'm originally with more of a quantum computing background and ML, and Katelyn has access to data. So and she has worked with NASA before. So we combined forces, and now we started WindtelligentAI, and we're building constantly. So I'm one half of Windtelligent, and Katelyn.
Yeah, and I'm Katelyn Hertel. I'm CEO, and I come from a data science background. And here at WindtelligentAI, we are trying to solve the problem that is predicting wind speeds at any height higher than residential height for various industries. And yeah, we've applied both my data knowledge and Shwetha, I spelled her name wrong, I'm sorry. It's Shwetha, but with Shwetha's knowledge of machine learning and AI, and then my data background, we've really been able to combine forces and create something really special.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Marcel, CEO and founder of Fyto, and we're using AI and various other technologies to predict and to try to stop wildfires. So we're trying to rid the world of something that's affecting us pretty much every day now, and especially trying to save properties as kind of the first angle for that. So before Fyto, I was in healthcare, applying AI actually as well to cancer detection. And there are various companies doing this now, but we, in my last company, basically just found ways to detect cancer in the earliest stages of your, in your blood at the earliest stages. Yeah, so, got a good range of AI in my background, but before that, I've just been in technology companies like ranging from Microsoft and others. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
I'll stop for now.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your backgrounds. I'm really curious, for the wind ladies, that's what I'm going to call you guys for this, for the duration of the call. What inspired you to start Windtelligent?
So when I was younger, I was very fortunate to go on a mission trip to Kyrgyzstan. I was 16 years old. And coming from rich America, I was quite culture shocked. And I was fortunate enough to live amongst the people there the way that they lived. And I saw how much they depended on the environment. In a third world country, the environment is everything. It's sustenance, it's life. And as I was growing up in school and learning about climate change and hearing how bad it was and just getting worse, I remembered my experience in Kyrgyzstan, and I immediately realized there are people, maybe not like me who live in a big city that rely on the environment as much, but there are tons of people in this world that do rely on the environment and it's deteriorating. And so I have kind of dedicated my adult life to climate hacking with some previous projects in the Arctic Ocean and predicting sea ice concentration. But I knew that this was a problem just from having been in the industry and dealing with some data. And the reason that I finally decided to tackle this problem was I finally had the skills under my belt to feel confident enough in my work. And then I found the perfect partner, which was Shwetha, who filled in all the gaps for me where my knowledge wasn't necessarily where it needed to be. And together, we've created this. But that was my inspiration. I know Shwetha has some environmental experiences as well.
Right. Yeah. So although I don't have that specific, really life-changing experience that Katelyn had, we met at not a climate hackathon, and we were both really passionate about climate. So that's how I knew immediately that Katelyn cares about the right things, because no matter where you we're all affected by the environment. And before the pandemic, I went to Puerto Rico to help with the earthquakes they experienced in 2019. So my team at school, it was a mixture of engineering and architecture students. We built this thing called a storm station, which had a solar panel and battery. And I was just in charge of connecting the software for that. So I already had experience in that connection between the physical and software. And so when we met, and we became friends really quickly, and we both live in Brooklyn. So we worked together on this, and it was just amazing how, since we're both passionate, we definitely focused on making sure that our model was really good. So yeah, so that's kind of how we both became passionate on wind. And I completely changed gears from what I was intending on doing with I just finished my master's. So like I was intending on going completely into quantum computing, and not that it's not there, but now this is like an application that we can really make a difference in.
That's incredible. Very educated bunch over here. And Marcel, what inspired you to start Fyto?
A couple of things, but basically just having the feeling that wildfires follow me around everywhere, which kind of does set off some alarm bells. But you know, the environment is getting worse, and it kind of all started when I was 17, and a wildfire in Cape Town swept down the mountain to where I was living at the time, and it nearly burnt my house down. It was just a couple of 100 yards away. I could have hit a golf ball into the flames from my front yard. So it was kind of eye-opening. And when me and my brother tried to go up to the firefighters and help them, they shoot us away and they said, look, you're untrained, you can't help us. So get out of here before you get hurt. And that's kind of always stuck with me. And I've had a long career in product and technology. And I've just been always thinking about that. Like, nearly losing my house and hearing about people who have lost their houses. And yeah, now I think I'm finally ready to actually make a change. And so started piece by piece and built you know, technology after piece of technology to finally come together with this holistic thing of Fyto to fully autonomously protect people from wildfires.
That's amazing. And what was your background? You know, you mentioned working at Microsoft and other big companies. How did you decide to use all your skills into bringing it into a startup, and specifically for climate?
Well, I think I probably watched too much Captain Planet when I was young, and so their environment has always been kind of like a big thing for me, because I always saw these like evil corporations doing evil things to the environment. And I was like, man, we need to be better at protecting our like precious resources. And then when I was at LSE, I did a lot of environmental economics. And then that just kind of like enforced the idea of, you know, the UN Global Sustainability Goals. And I've always wanted to kind of further those ever since I was at LSE. And now, you know, my company Fyto actually is trying to move the needle on currently 4 of those goals, and in the 10-year kind of scope, 10 of those goals. So it's incredibly important. And, you know, Katelyn actually mentioned this earlier, but the people most affected by climate disasters are the people in third world and developing countries. And coming from one myself, I knew I wanted to make that impact. But to fully answer your question, applying the technologies and the things that I've learned, I was a systems engineer at Microsoft and then at a hosting company, the biggest one in the world, sorry, the biggest one in Africa. And I just learned a lot about technology development, learned how to run a dev team, learned how to run, you know, pretty much every piece of hardware and software engineering. And so when I finally got to the point of like leaving business school and learning more about AI, I was like, man, I think I got the last piece. And so then I just started putting it together.
Got it. Well, Dan mentioned, thank you for mentioning SDGs. What are the 4 goals you're tackling today?
Oh, I should know this offhand. So access to water is one of the biggest ones. I'm actually going to need to cheat and pull them back up.
Okay, there's a thing called Google.
Yeah. I need to just look at the image, but I got it right here. So access to water. So hunger is a big one, because unfortunately, one of the reasons that I looked into this is because in Africa, wildfires sweep through farmlands. And that's kind of a big issue. And then we also use a lot of, at least in South Africa, we used a lot of actual potable water to put out wildfires, which is another huge issue. So life on land, hunger, clean water and sanitation are those 3 already. and then sustainable cities and communities. So part of Fyto's goal is to change the way that we interact with water as well, because when we are putting out fires or protecting properties, we're actually recycling that water in the process, and we're using very little potable water from the infrastructure. And throughout the year, when we're not running fire protection, we're actually using that potable water, that stored water for other things that is normally potable water. So things like watering your garden and cleaning your solar panels and washing your car, like those things aren't really used anymore because you've got a Fyto system.
That's incredible.
So
okay, you really thought this through. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
And Katelyn, what is your background? How did you get into tech and climate? I know you were recently in space. So tell us a little bit more about that, and what was your data research that kind of led to you getting a seat on a rocket ship, literally?
Yeah, so with this passion of climate and starting, I did a boot camp, a technical boot camp, and started my path to an engineering position. Slowly over the years, I started gaining skills to get me to where I am. But really what got me started was my participation in a NASA hackathon in 2016. And I've been a leader of that hackathon since. And through that, I've met many NASA contacts, many space contacts, and I ended up getting a seat on a zero gravity space flight just only 2 months ago. It's pretty crazy, but through that too, though, I've become kind of not an expert, but very familiar with NASA data sets. And I realized there's so much data out there, but parsing through it is really the challenge, and finding what's going to be relevant to you and your problem that you're trying to solve. And that's kind of leads me to like one of the biggest problems that we've personally had with our machine learning models is finding reliable data that we know to be true and validated. Part of ours is our model is having an observed file so that we know the truth of the wind speed. And we can compare our predictions to what we know to be true. But finding those data sets is some of the hardest things that we've had to cross so far. And, I'm actually kind of curious if Marcel has had, difficulty with finding reliable data in his field as well, because it just seems like in the climate industry, there's just not a lot of accessible data.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, it's probably the biggest thing. I think we spend probably 90% of our time finding and refining data, and then maybe 10% building a model. That's probably the way it goes right now for our data science stuff. And it's almost like a moving target as well. So we've got this database of databases, really, to find this data. A lot of it's through NASA, JPL, like you probably know. Some of it is from universities. UC does a lot of it. And yeah, it seems like, those links kind of expire within days. So you got this database of all these beautiful factors and data sets, and then like you click on it next week and then it's just gone. And I'm like, no. So I'm starting to learn the lesson the hard way, and just like, if I find data, I just download it all immediately. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that you also struggling with that, and I wish we could solve that together. Maybe everyone in the room can do that.
Well, Shwetha, I just saw you messaged about as long as the sensors are true as well. What's your background in quantum computing, and how can quantum computing help to process and parse through all of this data that both Katelyn and Marcel has been speaking about?
Well, quantum computing, I think, used with AI, and that's like a whole separate talk. That could be a whole thing. But it's quantum computing kind of accelerates AI in every way. it just accelerates AI in every single way. But in terms of the application of it, it still goes back to the nitty gritty of like, oh, we want to make sure, and that's like the point that I was kind of trying to get across, that like Windtelligent uses actual observed readings. It's not just model data. And we know the problems with AI right now. I mean, there's the problems with AI is that, you know, certain models are good for certain things and not others, right? So because of that, the most important thing is that the math behind it checks out to the reality. So, and this is equally as important in quantum computing as well, because we want to make sure that everything is not affected by, you know, like quantum computers, like classically are very affected by things like noise. They're so easily disturbed. So while we have hybrid systems right now that can be incorporated, the first step is always making sure the AI and the sensors and the data for that is accurate. And luckily we have in our data set like even a metric for how what the quality on each sensor is. So if we are doing our if our model is running and we notice like there's something off, we can check that, oh, is this sensor right? So like maybe we can even check if like maybe it's a faulty sensor, and that can account for this like weird prediction or forecast. So so yeah, that's just what we're training now. But with quantum, it can I mean revolutionize AI. Like AI is supposed to be like electricity, like quantum is like the electron almost in that comparison. So I hope I do that justice by saying that. It's kind of a whole nother discussion, but it's definitely something I'd love to delve more into if there was more time. But
Yeah.
it's a whole
No, I think
thing.
this is great to understand that some of these technologies have to work together,
For
right?
sure. It's
The
so interesting.
betterment of the whole industry.
For sure, especially with climate, because I think that's like the point of why this call and more calls like these are important, because like we're using technology as a tool to help things around us, especially when we see that the world around us is not doing so good, and just according to what the science is saying. So like the more that we're using technology and AI and quantum computing to applicable solutions, it's like the better, like we're doing good as human beings, I think.
That's definitely true. And, you know, so question for the Windtelligent ladies, what are the challenges of predicting wind? You know, I know that, you know, humans have tried to predict wind, you know, there's the wind gods, there's like multiple names in all different cultures. What are the kind of real challenges? And, you know, it gets harder, right, at a certain altitude?
Yeah, so I think the main challenge is Shway and I have the technology down. It's the science behind wind and what causes wind and all the things that build into a wind speed calculation. And so, you know, we have advised with a lot of different meteorologists, a former Air Force meteorologist, and we've learned through that process the different types of weather parameters that can build wind, or things such as that if a pressure changes, if the atmospheric pressure changes, that will cause a gust. And so those are things that we've had to learn and compile and then build into our model in order for it to accurately predict the wind speed at that height. The challenge that we are facing is that we have our observed files at that height and we know those to be true, but the parameters that we're coming in to train the model with, they are modeled parameters and known to have errors. So part of our challenge is knowing that we have one true data set and another data set that is off by a bit because it is based off of a modeled data set. And so correcting for that has been challenging, but really learning the science behind the wind and the history behind wind, the history behind wind prediction, the different things people have tried. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And nothing has seemed to work. But through our chats with these different scientists, we've really been able to come up with a good list of parameters that can detect different types of wind speeds.
That's awesome. And Marcel, what are the challenges of predicting wildfire? Or even just predicting a little tiny fire before it goes wild?
Well, everything that Katelyn just mentioned is definitely a big factor, because wind is probably the biggest factor when predicting wildfires. It's certainly there for predicting its spread. So, we've run a lot of different types of models. I've actually had several different types of teams work on this for predicting wildfires. So we take it from different approaches. And right now, our most accurate models take NASA's daily fire data, and it determines how the fire might spread based on those environmental factors. So we plug in, so we've got our own sensors, firstly. So we've developed our own sensors. We use a lot of Bosch instruments. And so our sensors on the ground are quite accurate, within 4 decimals, I believe. And so we've got our own on the ground readings, and then we can plug that into our various models. So with our sensors, we're becoming very accurate. If it wasn't for the sensors, we would be kind of at a much, much lower accuracy. And so now we're getting to an accuracy through our real world analytics of about 95%. So in other words, we can say, okay, there was a fire here yesterday. Where is it likely to be today? And that's proven to be, in the past 3 months, 95% accurate. And so we don't actually apply that to everywhere. We only apply it to our points of interest. And so because we're trying to protect properties first, we won't necessarily model the whole planet's wildfire spread, because we just don't have the computing power for that. And I don't know if anyone's seen AWS charges lately, but they're not kind to startups even. So, we can quickly rack up a bill of 100K a month if we were to crunch the whole planet easily. But yeah, so we've got these factors that we plug into it, and mostly we've got pretty much 4 data scientists per factor. So we've got a good and healthy team, and we've built a number of different models, and we use them for different things. And so we've got our sensors that go into our algorithm as well, which is a different model altogether. And so we've got our prediction model, and then we've got our protection model, or actual models, really. But yeah, I mean, it's tricky, and it's taken us a very long time to get to this accuracy. We've been working on this full tilt for about a year. So it is definitely a lot of effort, and I'm sure the Windtelligent ladies can tell us about that effort as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I don't know if you want to take that one, Katelyn.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I do think that AWS we're working with that too, with AWS too. I do also think like the power of like hosting and there's just so many different solutions for this. But yeah, it also makes me wonder, like, what is the eco-friendliness, climate friendliness of using like these servers that are still like really heavily being used, right? Like, so I was thinking about this, and it's just like, I think that's also something maybe we should all think about as like AI or climate people, that like while we're using technology, how much data is being parsed in, maybe like we don't want to be those people that use up so much server compute power. Maybe there's like a different solution. So like using, like, for instance, like different cloud solutions, or even like I know that this was used when I was working in protein prediction with Schrodinger last year, like Jenkins servers, where you kind of have to have like these janky kind of models, or like different servers and stuff like that. And cloud storage is definitely like a great way to go. And it just makes me think about how I know we were talking about quantum before, but I think the power and the speed of quantum computing is because it's entirely on the cloud. So figuring out ways, and this is more of a like a storage engineer problem once, they usually deal with these things. But I think the main thing is about understanding how to speed up that cloud hosting. So that's another thing I always look into is like, what is the speed of using like this cloud versus another cloud? There's so many different hosting methods, right? But that's also just for a separate talk, like how quickly using quantum cloud servers is also like another thing that's a potential possibility. But it's very hard with AWS because literally everybody uses it, and they're like the chiefs of the game right now, other than like Google platform system, GPS, right? It's called.
Yeah. And not only AWS, but Marcel was mentioning that he has his own sensors. We're not at the point where we have our own sensors where we can take our own data from it, and so we're heavily reliant on other sensors. But the sensor data that's out there, whether it's for wildfires or even just like humidity or wind, all the sensors that are out there for weather are heavily protected and privatized. And if it is public, it's heavily fragmented and very difficult to parse through. And so it would be interesting to take a group like this to think about, like, how do we take data and make it more accessible, especially for these initiatives that are going towards like things that are going to help our planet? Like how can we, like, I don't know, publicize some of this data? I know some of it's protected for certain reasons, but sensors that are just sitting in a forest on top of a tree, it's like, that should be public. And I feel like there should be more of a movement towards making that data more accessible so that more people like us can try to solve these problems. I mean, the more people we have working on this, the better the solutions are going to be.
100%.
I think a thing I love about like climate communities and the climate startup is like we're all on the same team. Like, it's not like one company is fighting against it's like, oh, cool. Like, Fyto's trying to help wildfires. We're trying to predict wind speeds, like for, renewable wind energy and like all these different industries where it's all on the team that like wants to improve situations for the environment. So like nobody is losing here and giving accessible data or giving something that's like goal oriented, that has an application that is trying to be a part of all these different things. So that's something that I've noticed from being in different spaces, like different kinds of communities, is that like the lack of the competitiveness in climate communities. I really love that. I think that I'm kind of new to it, there's all these different climate organizations, but everyone is just so nice about a lot of these things, at least in my experience, because we're kind of like all trying to educate each other of what their experiences is or what our experiences are, and we grow that way. So I've had a really good experience in climate communities too, with data and information. So yeah, I just love climate communities. Really
I love what Dan said. He says, data wants to be free. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
How about open source? Are there open source data for this activity? Yeah.
There's whether from the government, like certain data sets from the government are totally public and accessible, but a lot of the necessary data to make it, if we want kind of like the reach that we want to have, we want the more data to build our machine learning models. So while we have like public data sets, though there's problems in only have, and there's also certain gatekeeping too, but like there's problems in, in having access to data that I guess we're not supposed to have. I don't know, like when it comes to
Yeah.
And the other thing too is the public data that does exist is highly fragmented. I mean, the files that we're dealing with, the pre-processing itself takes hours on these files. They're 4D files that can't be easily read. And so in order to isolate the one field that you need in one file, that's, 2 to 3 hours of coding work. And so it can be really difficult. Like, you can win the lottery and find the best public data set, but it's going to take you literal days or weeks to get through
like a needle in a haystack.
Yes.
Yeah, the haystack might be like a golden like trove of data, but you still got to dig through it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So David had a question. He's working on his skydiver's license, moving to WindSuite. He thinks that your AI would be helpful for people like him. He wonders if you plan to bring your data public, like a mobile app or website.
Yeah, like, so we do. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, once we have our prediction, like our larger model, like ready to go, and we are going to market, which we are not yet at, but once we are there, there are certain data sets that I think we'd like to make public. At least, like, there are certain things that we're noticing, like, for instance, like, certain parameters are oppositely correlated that you would not expect to be oppositely correlated when you graph them out. And these are things that we also, we want to educate the community on. I know meteorologists and scientists might know that, but people like us who are just trying to take on a new project, that's not something that's widely known. So I think it's really important that, without giving away our proprietary algorithm, I think documenting our process and even our failures, I think, is really important for this industry. That's
great. Davis says, because guys who are paragliding with windsuits can meet at jump spots and then wait for the wind. Love it. Yes. So Shwetha just posted about the 3 tiers. Free for the paid data sets for enterprise and business. Got it.
Yeah, and what I like about what Katelyn suggested from the get-go of us building this is that we do have, like, because individuals don't use it, like, it's the case that the more people that you have on a team, the more you're going to call the API, which is what we're building. So if it's an individual, it's free, but it's just that you have less calls to it because you don't need to call it as much. So that's like a way that business models should be, because, that just makes sense. If you're one person, you're not going to be using like 300,000 calls to an API. But like, if you're an enterprise, the most people would call it many times. So that's something that I really liked about Windtelligent, is that, like, we have still, like, the tier of, like, if you're an individual, you still get access to the API and the call to predict wind speed, but you're not an enterprise, so you're probably not going to, like, David could use it for, his for his skydiving thing. That might help, but he's not going to call it 300,000 times because he's not like a software company.
Right. Yeah, I think more companies need to do that free tier so that more people like us, who in the beginning are just experimenting to see if something's possible, you have access to the data. In a free tier, you're not going to be abusing your right, but, like, it encourages more projects like this, and I'd love to see more businesses offering a free tier.
Yeah. I love what Tony said. He called you guys the Planeteers as the Captain Planet here. I'm curious how, obviously we're talking about the elements, we're talking about wildfire and wind. How can you guys see, collaboration or sharing of knowledge or data? How can we kind of solve this problem together? I guess, question for Marcel to start.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I mean, there's obvious synergies here. Like I said earlier, our biggest challenge is predicting the wind and to figure out how that's going to push the fire forward if there happens to be one already. And then spot fires as well. So it's not just existing fires, but it's new fires that can really come up from the wind. And yeah, so wind is actually our biggest challenge when it comes to modeling and prediction. So there's, obvious synergies there. And I can imagine that you'd probably want, access to data and access to sensors, and that's obviously something that we can offer. But moreover, if we have powerful wind prediction, we just offer a better chance at saving properties and saving humans and lives and the planet. So it'll be wonderful to work together with the Windtelligent ladies and their company, and anyone else who happens to solve a problem that can move the needle forward.
Yeah, and I'm actually curious. So like how with your company and the products you offer and how you're trying to like stop the wildfires, like how much in advance would be beneficial for you for a prediction of wind? Like would 10 minutes for an hourly forecast be good, or are you looking, is like 6 hours better for wildfires?
So the most important thing is, I would say the threshold is about 6 to 10 hours would still be fine. Obviously, the closer, the better. But really, we can do an immense amount of good in just 24 hours, because that could be the make or break difference there. Like, we know that if we enable our system within maybe 4 or 5 hours, that it works. Because it's already saved properties from fires. So we know that we haven't obviously experimented with that too much because we don't really want to. And, we don't really want to accidentally set something on fire and then have that run wild. But we are running those experiments all the time. And so, we've got our team out at RMIT in Australia that's setting something on fire or setting things on fire and determining like how long we actually need to have in advance before it is perfectly effective. So, we're actually conducting that experiment right now. So it's funny that you asked, but once I got the results, I can tell you. But I can for sure tell you that if we know within 12 hours that a wildfire is going to reach you, that's more than enough time.
Amazing. Yeah, I think there's definitely synergies here. And, our goal is to be able to do the wind at 100 meters, but part of our learning is that it's highly correlated to what's on the ground, and the readings on the ground are better quality in terms of our model. So there's definitely synergies here. And I think more climate solutions should be working together because the elements are all connected.
Yeah, for sure. And incidentally, we actually built one of our models because we tried to get one of the models, actually 2 others. I won't mention names, but they built pretty impressive analytics that take a generalized approach. So if in the next 12 months you got some risk of wildfire or not, that kind of thing. And they wanted to charge us $1,000 per API call. And I'm like, this is crazy. And I kind of get it because of the AWS costs that we mentioned before, but still, that's not going to move the needle for anyone but an insurance company that they then charge for that insurance premium, essentially look up.
That's great. Well, I mean, this is the whole point of bringing people with similar interests together, right? So there could be discussion, collaboration, and connection. Before we enter a period of Q&A, because I wanted to give the audience also a chance to ask questions and maybe even provide any connections or feedback or expertise. How are you guys looking to kind of solve these problems in the long term, like with AI? And how do you see kind of your data and your machine learning model growing? For the AI nerds in the audience, they might want to know.
Well, I think for our model, our beginning steps were to create baseline models that we could say were accurate for one location. I think that was the bigger start. And now our future is building a larger model that takes in several of those baseline models and tells us which one is performing the best for that location. And so that larger model is going to take some time to build. And so that very much is in our future plans. But we recently have realized, there's a lot of different things that our model could be applicable to. Wind is not that different from solar radiation and solar power. So, few years down the line after we master wind, who knows, maybe we can move on to renewable solar energy. But with the AI, I know that, Shwetha can talk about the larger model, but that's what we've been working on. That's what our plans for the next few months are.
Yeah, so I think we have definitely lots of, so Katelyn worked on the baseline models, but we have, I just know from my previous experience, like bandit optimization was something that we're using to have a way to predict in like, so basically the way that it works is it takes in several models and it's able to understand performance of those models and use that. What we're doing is we're trying to use bandit optimization so that we can use several different models into our AI. So I think that's one method, but of course, like this is a discussion. So what I also love about AI groups is that no one's, and it's kind of based on the paper that's out. There's a lot of papers. So like another thing that I was testing out like last week was incorporating the extended Kalman filter. So I'm learning about that and reading about that and incorporating that into one of our models. So the way that we're doing this is that we're making it flexible so that we're not just stuck with one model. We're making sure that we can incorporate many different models, because AI is such a, the field of it is that we find out this math function works better than this math function, and now that's an AI model, and now that's the best way to do this with this for this kind of metric, right? That's usually the way that it goes. So no one's, there's people that might know more about this certain kind of model, which is why I like to be part of AI groups to learn more about that stuff. But we are incorporating right now we're kind of building the bigger model that can have those baseline models feed in. And so yeah, that's kind of what we're doing right now. We're seeing good results. So, but we would love to learn more because no one's an expert.
Right.
No, I mean, there are experts, actually, let's be real. There are experts, but until another paper comes along, I don't know if anyone in the audience has the experience of being just overwhelmed with the amount of papers and just validating papers and making sure that they're real. And part of my master's was doing PowerPoints on the papers because it's really a PowerPoint that needs to be done, because it's just there's just so much information, and then you want to make sure that it's about knowing the pros and cons of it isn't as explicit necessarily sometimes, depending on the paper. So yeah, and part of our hackathon, what's that?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I saw Marcel nodding his head, so I feel like he knows the papers coming out. But yeah, AI and machine learning is constantly changing. I don't know if Marcel, you've experienced that as well.
Yeah, I want to hear from Marcel kind of how you've been able to apply AI to the sensor, so you have actually hardware and software working together.
Yeah, so we had to do that because it's so multifaceted. So we take a core, a first principles approach and try to attack the core of the fire. So basically heat, oxygen, and fuel. And there are so many factors that impact those three sides of the triangle. So, we need to figure out humidity and soil moisture and fuel moisture, and then heat in the environment, wind in the environment. So, we currently have about 13 factors in each of the fire prediction models or the fire spread models. And then we've got more in our protection models. And so we're trying to figure out the most so basically we've got so many different types of models that we kind of chose a pray or spray approach and applied various models to the data to see what made the most sense, and then refine from there. So there isn't one perfect model that we've stumbled upon for any of the prediction systems. And I'm sure you guys know this dealing with wind, but it's so complicated because the environment itself impacts it, right? So you don't have a perfect kind of map of the environment to figure out how the environment is going to bend the wind and impact the wind. And that alone is something that we'll probably need to get to in probably 10 years only. It won't even be that soon. But the thing for us is that our needle is moving wildfire protection. It's not building the perfect AI model. And so what we're trying to do as well is, for instance, model how much water, wetting agents, or foam we need to dispense in order to protect your property or your vineyard or whatever it is. Actually, probably more of an orchard. But so we're trying to be as economical with the water and conserve water and energy as much as possible, because most of the time power cuts happen, water cuts happen, internet cuts happen. And so not just that, but we had to be very economical with our computing power, because we've built an edge device that goes on the property and will work even if your internet and your power has been cut, because that's how lightweight it is. It runs on Raspbian. So it's just incredibly important for us to create these mega models and then distill it down into something that's quite small and computable at the edge.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I love that everyone has their kind of models set up and they're so willing to share, their learnings on this call and with each other. I mean, that's truly kind of how we build community, is just having this open dialogue and being able to sharpen each other and share ideas so that the ideas can move forward faster. I wanted to give the audience just a few minutes to ask just a tiny few set of questions. I know some people are putting in the chat, so if people are asking questions in the chat, whoever feels like they want to get on it, feel free to get on it. But I wanted to give 2 people in the audience a chance to ask questions live on the call. Any takers?
I do see there's a question in the chat that might be for Marcel. Are you using TF Lite on those Raspberry Pis or something else to do that edge machine learning?
So no, we're not. What we're doing is, so my brother's a CTO, and so he's been a software engineer for a very long time. And so he's doing all of that. So I can't speak to it too closely, but basically it's mostly Python running on those Pis. And we would have the model in the algorithm on the Pi running in Python at the edge. So we're currently not using any binaries like that, and it's actually all written in Python.
Okay, good question, Dan. And David says, guys, your team is great. You're doomed to success. You're doing a great, noble thing. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to see and hear you. Favorable win to you.
Thanks, David.
Yes, that's the skydiver in the audience. Someone also asked, how do you visualize your data? I think this is the important part. So this is something we've talked about before, where there's obviously different ways to visualize data. How can people best find the data and make it meaningful for them?
Yeah, I think it's hard, right? Because I mean, like for one of our data sets, it's 86 billion lines of data. And it's just like, how do you show that in a meaningful way that actually tells a story? And that's actually kind of one of my the things I've done in my career in the past is storytelling through data visualization. And really the way that right now, we've been able to find success is by mapping out the actual validated wind speeds that are observed, and then mapping our predictions directly over them to show how accurate or not they are. And showing that visualization is very effective, to show where you're lacking, where your model might not be doing as well. And so then you learn you can train for those things. But sometimes it's as easy and as simple as just printing out a CSV or an Excel spreadsheet of your data results and going through them and filtering and just playing in Excel. And all of a sudden you'll have your aha moment. And that's a very good way of moving forward.
Good to know. Well, what are your, I guess, current goals right now for both teams? Seems like both of you are kind of in the early stages of a startup. So I am intimately familiar with how challenging that might be. Share a little bit about, how can people follow you, support you, and what are your current goals for today?
Marcel, I'll let you start while I bring up our contact slide.
Thanks, Katelyn. Yeah, so the big thing for us is we're trying to get enough houses protected so that Californian insurance companies can start to buy in and realize that we can help them in the fight against protecting properties and reducing their risk. So that's probably our biggest goal, is just to get into the insurance companies to make sure that they are actually reducing the premiums. To give you an idea, there are already 4.5 million homes in the US that cannot get proper insurance against wildfires. So if your house burns down and you're one of those 4.5 million people, you're kind of just screwed. And it's the worst situation. And most of the time, it's houses that are quite valuable, and they're in the highest risk areas, obviously, because it's really just an actuarial equation, right? So if your house is very high risk, insurance companies are just not going to protect you or cover you in case of an emergency. So yeah, we're trying to reach out to the people that need it most, because we know we can protect them. We've already done it before. We protected a house from a wildfire that did sweep through there. And yeah, so that's like the biggest thing, is just we can scale very fast because we build everything in-house. And all of our software is built to scale. All of our hardware is built to scale. And it's just a matter of getting into those properties.
Yeah, and I think our goals right now, we are fundraising, but really we do want to focus. We have several verticals that we can apply to, but really the climate vertical is what we want to focus on. And we're really interested in finding the best locations in the world for wind power and at what height those turbines should be at to optimize for the most wind power. And right now in the world, there is a crisis with solar power, especially in the United States. And this is the first year on record that wind power is cheaper than solar power. And so our goal is to start turning heads back towards renewable wind energy. A lot of people have strayed away from it just because it was expensive, and solar was just easier to get a hold of, but that's not the case anymore. And to be honest, we should have had this figured out for if this ever did occur. And now that we are in this situation, I think it's more important now than ever to be able to master this technology so that we have this renewable energy source to help save the planet.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. For those who attended, the contact information is in the chat. So for anyone that wants to reach out, also, if anyone knows any data sources, investors, or partners that these incredible founders should connect with, please proactively reach out. And Todd, any last words before we wrap up the conversation?
Hey, amazing panel. Thank you so much for all your time. And thank you for our audience members for all your questions and feedback.
I know we
We
had
are probably,
attention, like people stayed on.
oh
Like, we
yeah,
got 2 pages
it's
of
been
people
great.
who stayed on the whole time. Yeah. Good job, everyone.
Thank you all. Yeah. And so, yeah, for next month, we're pretty busy with this big fundraiser we're doing called Fun of Funds Festival on August 18th. And so we hope you can attend. We'll send out an email. Yeah, normally we do this event every last Monday of the month. And so we usually need to figure out a topic for next month. And so if anyone has any interesting ideas for what a topic could be for next month, put in the chat, express your opinion, and we'll start evaluating them and finding good speakers to address that topic. And so besides that, thank you all for your time, and hopefully you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we'll hopefully see you very, very soon.
Yes.
Thank you
Great.
so much,
Thank you
guys.
so much, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. LA Tech Week in 3 weeks. So we'll see you there.
Thank you, Lisa, for moderating.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks for sharing the incredible work you're doing. So we are lucky. Bye,
Have a good night.
everyone.